Hi, and welcome to today's Seed World Pro Power Talk. I am super excited to be joined by Miss Eileen Roth. Now, I call her Miss Eileen because I feel like I personally have a lot to learn in this area. Eileen is what I will call the authoritative expert when it comes to time management, office organization, and home organization. She is the founder of Everything in Its Place, the author of Organizing for Dummies, and has been featured on the Today Show, Oprah, and a number of other media outlets, including Men's Health and most recently the Washington Post. So, Eileen, thanks so much for joining us today, and we are super excited to have you here.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
So, for today's Power Talk, we are going to be honing in on time management and how to get the most out of your day. And when we have productive days, we have productive weeks and productive years. And those are the things that can really help move the needle forward when it comes to reaching our goals and moving the needle. So, how is it that, there are people out there that are always 10 minutes early. They turn in their projects a week early and they are buttoned up and never kind of miss a beat there. And then there are other people who are habitually 5 to 10 minutes late, always asking for more time on a project. And the people around them plan around that, I'll call it chaos. Unfortunately, I fall into the latter of those. So I'm always reading how to and how to get better in that. So is this something that can be learned? Is there help out there for people like me?
Absolutely. In fact, I always tease about the fact that there is no DNA, there's no gene that says you're going to be organized and someone else isn't, going to be, or that in your case, as you say, you're not going to be organized. It is not inherited. It is a skill that you can learn. In fact, I once asked my dad when I started being somewhat organized, and he said, since I was 5. And I said, what do you mean 5? He said, yeah, well, we always taught you, take a toy out, put it back. So you followed what we taught you. And that's why I named my company Everything in Its Place.
Fantastic. Well, how did you come into this kind of area, and why is it so important that you dedicate a lot of time to helping others in this area?
Why is a good question, but I would have to say because I enjoy it. I actually think it's fun to set up a file system. Most people would say, oh my God, are you kidding? I'm going to sit there and do file labels or organize my computer so that I can find files. Yes, I know. I find getting that organization is fun, but really it helps you so much in your everyday life, organizing absolutely everything. You can do things faster. You save time. And in the business world, of course, it's saving money. And so when I work with my business clients, they're so happy to say, oh my God, I don't have to have papers all over my desk. I don't have to have my schedule crazy. And by being organized and setting some routines and scheduling things, knowing your own body rhythms, you can work better.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I have heard most recently on this subject is that even though it seems like you are structured to a T, it actually following that structure or following that routine that you set out for yourself allows for more free time if you're able to stick to it. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. That's how you can be more productive, is by setting routines. And we're going to talk about 2 particular parts of routines today. The 2 P's, your peak and your pace.
Fantastic. So what are those? So let's go ahead and dig in. What is a peak and what's a pace, and what do you do with that?
Okay, let's start out with your peak time. You've probably even heard the expression, someone says they're a morning person. So what's a morning person? If you picture in your mind somebody who gets out of bed, has energy, starts doing the things they do in the morning, whether it's going out and exercising or taking a walk or jogging, or they walk the dog or whatever they do first in the morning. And then the next thing and the next thing, and they do breakfast, and then they get to work. When they get to work, they'll go in the coffee room, maybe grab a cup of coffee. They'll maybe say hello to a few people in the coffee room, but they're at their desk almost right away if they're a morning person, and they're chugging away. They are focused on what they're doing. They're working on it steady, getting things done. Then they'll have lunch, and morning people then usually tend to slow down in the afternoon. So they'll take a little more time in the morning than they do in the afternoon. They'll notice that their energy drops a bit. So when you're a morning person, that's how your day goes. The afternoon person, you can guess, is the exact opposite. They're that sluggish kind of person, just kind of wanders into the office. In fact, they needed extra time in the morning to get ready to go to work too. And so they slowly got, up and dressed and out of the house, and they get to the office, and they're going to spend a little more time in the coffee room saying hello to people, chatting, go to their desk, and they're not energized to do their hardest project of the day at all. And they're sitting there and they're getting some things done. They're just not working at their optimum speed. Then they'll have lunch and they get powered up, and now they have more energy in the afternoon. Now, believe it or not, there are evening people. In fact, I'm one of them. I get more done in the evening than I get done during the day. So when I worked 9 to 5 for association management firms, I had to find another time. And I looked at myself and said, okay, I'm really kind of down in the afternoon. So my second peak is the morning. So that's when I did the things that I'm going to tell you about now. There's 4 things you want to do in your peak time. So if you're a morning person, you're going to do these in the morning. And if you're an afternoon person, you're going to do them in the afternoon. And if you're an evening person, you're going to pick what's your second best. So those 4 things include, first of all, your hardest project. The thing that's going to be the hardest for you to do because you need the most energy. And of course, that's often your top priority, but it might not be. You get to decide whether your top priority is the thing that you want to do first, or you want to start out with that hardest project. Also, something creative. This is when your mind is at its best, so you really want to use things when you need to be creative. So, for instance, the marketing department, if you're working on an ad and you want to be creative about it, you're going to want to work on that in your peak energy. And then, of course, problem solving, whenever there's a problem. So thinking about problem solving, if you have a staff and you know when their peak time is, you're never going to get everybody on your staff to have the same time. It's possible, but you can get all people having all the same peak time, that they say they're all morning people. But if you're going to have a staff meeting and you want to problem solve something, you want to be sure that staff meeting is in the time that most of the people are in their peak time, and you'll probably get more done at that time. If you're having a staff meeting that's kind of routine, you might want to see how much you can just send out in the mail. But if you're going to have it as a meeting and we're just kind of reporting on how the project's going or what you're working on or how the ad campaign's going, and then you could do it in when they're non-peak times. And that's going to be the majority of the people in the meeting. Okay, so if that's what we're doing in our peak time, what are we doing in our non-peak time? Well, that's our routines. That's the ultimate system, really, when you think about it. A routine is something you do steadily. We just talked about a morning person. So a morning person has a routine at home. They get up. If they have an animal that needs to be walked outside, they're going to walk the animal first. So they might have just thrown on some clothes, walk the animal, and then come back in to shower, get dressed, have breakfast. If you think about your morning, you already have a routine, whether you recognize it or not, because 9 times out of 10, you're doing the same exact thing in the same orders of when you journal, when you meditate, when you exercise, when you get dressed, when you have breakfast. You brush your teeth before breakfast, you brush your teeth after breakfast. It's a routine. So now you want to try to get your day into some routines so that you can utilize your non-peak time to do the low priorities. That's what you want to be doing so if you're a morning person, that's your afternoon. If you're an afternoon person, that's going to be your morning work. Don't try to get your hardest project done in the morning if you're an afternoon person, because you're going to be struggling. I mean, you might get it done, but it's going to take you longer than if you were working at your best energy level. So I hope that makes sense.
It's really important to be aware of when is your peak time, when are you most on, when are you most productive, what hours of the day. So
right, and you may want to take 2 or 3 days to notice, do you feel stronger or more energetic in the morning, or do you feel stronger or more energetic in the afternoon? And as I said, if you're an evening person, if you can't figure out when your second peak time is, figure out when your low time is. And you'll, by process of elimination, decide when your second peak is.
Uh-huh. And one of the things that you mentioned in a previous conversation was the quiet hour. And what is the quiet hour? Where do you schedule it? And why is that important?
Yes, the quiet hour is something that's, it came out, oh, I don't know, maybe I heard about it in the earlier 1980s, 1990s, and I started implementing that, and I found it really helps a lot. So during your peak time, pay attention to if you have an hour that's stronger. For instance, let's say you're a morning person, you get to your desk and you start working at 9 o'clock. So you're doing pretty good, but at 10 o'clock, you feel like you have more energy. So that then would become your peak of your peak. And that's when you want to have a quiet hour. Now, this can be a little difficult to do in a larger corporation, but the important thing is to let your staff know. And of course, you want your staff to let you know when their peak hours are, so you don't interrupt them, because you're going to take just 1 hour during the day and have no interruptions. If you have a do not disturb on your phone, you want to push that button so that no calls come through. If you have, especially if you're in a small office, you have receptionists, you can let them know this is your peak hour. Could they, just say that you're busy? And in your calendar, you actually can write down an appointment. Don't write down quiet hour and don't write down your name. A little trick you can do there is just put your initials in there. And most people won't even stop to think, except for the immediate people in your office. If someone else could see your calendar, that there's just a meeting with that person. It's a meeting with you. And you're not going to do any emails. You're not going to answer any phone calls. So if your phone does ring or your cell phone rings, let it go to voicemail. It will disrupt you a little bit, and it does take time to get back from interruptions, but not as bad as if you actually took the call. And so during that hour, you want to concentrate on the biggest thing you want that day, either the hardest project or problem solving, creativity, but pick the hardest thing or the thing you need to concentrate on the most, that it needs extra focus, and do that during your quiet hour. Amazingly, those 5 hours, because you have 5 days to the week, in those 5 hours, you'll probably get more done than you get done the entire week because you've had no interruptions. So try it for yourself first, and then try having your staff implement it and see if you don't get more productivity out of all of you. So by the time the week's over, more things are happening than you could believe could have happened before.
Fantastic. And so that kind of brings us to our second P, which is pace. How does pacing fit into that? And yeah, what is pace?
Okay, your pace is another body rhythm that's kind of natural. You just probably don't realize it. It's the way that you operate. So your pace is how things are getting done, and you're going to have to pay attention to this to see how it's working. You are either a hare or a tortoise. Now, what do I mean by that? I'm sure you've probably heard the old story of the race between the hare and the tortoise. So the hare thought, tortoise is going to move slow. He barely can walk or get anywhere. And why they agreed to race, I don't know. But the fable goes that the hare decided that, he's got it all over the tortoise. There's no way that the tortoise could win the race. So he just, runs around hopping and looking everywhere and looking at everything. And he eventually takes a nap, as the story goes, and the tortoise ends up winning the race. He just plods along steadily. Okay, so now, are you a hare or a tortoise? So I'm going to share something with you so you can just see. Okay, so here's a little adaptation that Donald and Nancy Tubesing came up with. This was not my idea, but I believe it really helps you understand what the tortoise is like. So the tortoise is your slow and steady person. Moves ahead slowly and steadily, will not rush, doesn't take unnecessary risks, prefers life on an even keel without crisis, sets own speed, and takes one step at a time. The hare, on the other hand, moves quickly with short spurts, works well under pressure, likes to explore, enjoys risk and adventures, hops from project to project, and is easily distracted. So let's see how these two actually do their projects. Quiet hours. We take our quiet hour, and the tortoise is going to start with 3 projects. And let's say he's going to work on each one Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So he's going to start out with project C on Tuesday, and A on Wednesday, and B on Thursday. So he's done 3 projects, taken an hour, and each one got done, saying that they're only, an hour apiece. But the hare doesn't work that way. The hare likes variety. So if you're the type of person that's a hare, on Tuesday, you're going to take 20 minutes of project A, and then 20 minutes of project B, and 20 minutes of project C. That keeps you from having to get bored, feel like you have to work on one project the whole time. On Wednesday, the hare's probably going to change it up, and instead of starting with A, he's going to start with B, and then do C, and then do A. And on Thursday, he's going to do C, and then A, and then B. So he just breaks it up. The tortoise is your focus person. They can work for long times, maybe even 2 or 3 hours at a stretch without being really bored, as long as they're really involved in their project. The hare could never, ever do that, usually not even an hour. So they want to break up their things. He's still doing all 3 projects, 20 minutes apiece, so still doing an hour at each project, but only doing 20 minutes. Working in shorter spurts, he works more effectively and is more productive. So if you're finding yourself not being a tortoise and that you are the hare that likes variety, you want to look at a project and strategically plan that so that you're not working on that whole project just for the whole hour, but breaking it up so you're working on just segments of it. If you try scheduling that way, you'll find that you get more done and you won't be so frustrated that you're working on something for a really long time unless you're really enjoying it.
Are there projects that that require you to not necessarily break it up into 20-minute spurts, or even extending it a little bit longer to 30 minutes? So are there things that for the hare that maybe they like to hop around and do the different things, but it takes time to jump or to bounce from one to the other? And so are there things that you see where like maybe they would really benefit from dedicating a full chunk to?
The hare's going to benefit from deciding what works better. If he's really involved in a project, he might be kind of like a tortoise and work on it straight. Mm-hmm. And if he's not involved in it, or not feeling great about doing it, he's benefiting by chunking it and taking just segments and doing a part at a time.
And they both move the needle forward.
Right. And they're both moving the needle forward the same. If you remember the chart, the hare took 20 minutes on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So he still did a whole hour on project A, and the same on B and C, just didn't do it all at once. Mm-hmm. And so enjoyed the project better because of the fact that he chunked it and broke it into segments. That works for the tortoise too. If we got a project he doesn't really want to do but needs to be done, something he doesn't like, breaking it up is going to help to change, doing it and getting it done more efficiently.
Mm-hmm. And what about connecting with vendors or suppliers, or how does some of our routine stuff fall into the pacing?
Okay. You're going to do all of that stuff pretty much. I mean, if you're a real social person, you might want to do it in some of your peak time, but I still suggest you do it in your non-peak time if you can. I mean, you can't always fit into if a vendor is not available, they may have to fit whenever they fit into the day. I mean, everything can't be perfect. In a perfect world, you would stick everything you liked in your peak time and everything you didn't like to do in your non-peak time. But things happen that you can't do that. And we're going to take a look at, how you can schedule things. This is a full screen of December of 18. And to be honest, this is something that I made up. There's a few things in here that were true. For instance, if you see the brown, those are doctor's appointments for us. And so they block out anything else that was there. But let's take a look at the week for a month, because I think that's easier to understand how this works. And I'm showing you 2 things at once, actually. One is called time blocking. and the other is color coding. And I'm going to come back to color coding, but let's talk about time blocking for a minute. So first thing in the morning, a lot of people like to look at their emails. So I put that up there as first thing in the morning. Actually, I'm going to pick a different week. And the reason I picked this one is because for me, I listen to this gentleman on Tuesdays at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I listen to this lady on copywriting at 9 o'clock in the morning. So that would throw technically my Tuesday off. It means if I want to start out and get a glance at my emails to see if there's anything important that I need to do, I need to push that up to 7:30 on Tuesdays. Whereas the rest of the week, if I just start my day at 8:30, then I can look at my emails first, and by 9 o'clock, I can start my quiet hour, because I found that 9 o'clock is my best time from 9 to 10. So, and I put priority A in there. So assuming that I wanted to work on priority A or whatever I wanted to do. So this is just a temporary thing to kind of see. And so same thing, because of these two meetings, that throws off my quiet hour till 10 o'clock on Tuesdays, that I can't do that first. Whereas, and the same thing on Mondays, I have a meeting I tend to go to, and into that one, I'm moving then I've got my quiet hour in place, but now that throws priority B down, and priority B is also happens to work out to be down in the same place on Tuesday, but on a normal day, I would be moving on to the second priority and then the third priority. So a normal day, or a technical perfect day, would be going straight through and getting them all done by 12 o'clock. And that doesn't mean that I have to work on just one priority during, the quiet hour, or just one priority, B and C, because all projects are not an hour. This is just a made up schedule, so you could just see how this works. This is called time blocking, where you actually set aside a certain time. And I put lunch in at 12 o'clock every single day. And then right after lunch, I'll take another glance at emails. Now, a lot of people like to check emails 3 times a day. So I put this into this perfect schedule type thing as 3 times a day. And then at the end of the day, just about, because there is a routine you want to do at the very end of the day. Every day you want to take a look at tomorrow. So I call it plan for tomorrow. 1, to clear off your desk, and 2, to look at your schedule, what's going on for tomorrow. So if there's anything that you need to know, like an 8 o'clock meeting the next morning, you need to know that the night before. And so it's really important on Fridays that you take a look, because on Friday you might find out you have to be somewhere else and not at your office at 8 o'clock in the morning. That means you need to take with you whatever you need, any paperwork or anything you might need for that meeting, any reports, and that you're not coming into the office right away. If you wait, and a lot of people do, they first look at their schedule the first thing in the morning. Well, that's okay to look at to see how your day is going. But if you're first planning then you don't realize that you've got these meetings that are going to affect your day, and you need to be ready for it. Mm-hmm. Of course, you need to do a little bit more than just looking at the end of the day. You need to technically always look first at your month. And with Outlook, it's a little bit hard because you can't see everything. And of course, I've got that whole time blocking schedule in here. And so everything shows up, and it's harder to see that you may have to, look at your week. And when you're planning, you also want to look, what's the week ahead? Where do I have some empty spaces? Now, again, this is a perfect schedule. It's not going to work out that way all the time, because meetings change, and you probably have a staff meeting in here somewhere. This happens to be close to my perfect schedule, where I do social media at the end of the day, and the last thing is emails, and then cleaning off the desk and looking at what's going on for the next day. But I'm also often looking at what's going on for the rest of the week, because the week at a glance really kind of shows me, what's happening over the whole week. And then you can go in, and this is what your day will look like. Well, Sunday's not going to help us. So Monday, this is how your time blocking looks. You can actually see what you technically would like to get done for that day. And you would, of course, put in your things. Now, when you're scheduling, you also have to look at the time of year. You have seasonal things that affect you as to, when you need to be planning things. I know that the winter time is more industry meetings. Therefore, the marketing department's going to be really busy in the fall, making sure they have everything that's lined up to get in for literature they want for trade shows and everything else. And at the same token, advertising and everything that they need. And so when do you need to worry about certain major projects? You need to be planning them based on an annual calendar. So you'd want to be looking ahead always, especially since this is, January. It's technically Get Organized month. And so you want to spend some time saying, okay, what are my months going to look like? And even if you don't know for sure that you're going to this industry meeting, put the meeting in. You can always cancel it, but if you block that time, you don't schedule something else during that time. And besides putting the meeting in, also put in your travel day. And then if you don't go to the meeting, you just knock it out of your calendar, but you set that time aside. Same thing if you've got a deadline for something. With deadlines, you always want to set your actual deadline. You can put it into your calendar, but especially for your staff, if you're delegating, give them a deadline that is, give them a deadline that is 2 or 3 days earlier than it's due. So if something needs to get fixed or changed, you have that cushion. So the other idea of time blocking, and I'm going to close this down a minute, or I'll let you look at the.
So you mentioned the staff meetings, and going back a little bit and talking about the peak and the pace. When is the best time to host a staff meeting? Do you want it to be on people's peak time? Do you want their best, or is an off time better to host a staff meeting?
I think it depends on your staff meeting. If at all possible, I think people are moving more because everyone's on the computer so much anyhow to save time, because we have so much to do these days, because people can reach you in seconds, that less staff meetings than necessarily having one every week, because a lot of it you can just send in your report by such and such a date, and then you compile it all and where everybody's at, and then send it out as just an email if it's just reporting. And if you're going to hold your staff meeting because you do really need to discuss things, then I would, as I mentioned earlier, try to schedule it. So find out when everybody else's peak time is on your staff. I mean, obviously, if you've got even 4 people, there's going to be a chance that somebody's peak time is not the same as everybody else's.
Right.
But if you're lucky enough that everybody was on the same peak time, then schedule it during the peak time. But if not, when is the most people on what? Are more morning people? Are they more afternoon people? And that way your brainstorming and everything else that you're doing is going to come out. And I'll give you a quick side tip too. This is a routine that I started when I was working at an association management firm. Before we left the meeting, we said what everybody on that team was going to do on that project. And instead of setting out like meeting minutes, I created what's called a meeting action chart. And the meeting action chart just said, this person is doing this part of this project and they're having it by this deadline. And everybody got a copy of the meeting action chart. So you knew what people were doing, and everyone else also knew who was doing that, and they didn't have to write it down during the meeting. One person would take those notes and put down, and it might be you, what you assigned to different people, and then everybody knows on this particular project, this is who's working on that, and they know who to contact if they need information that person's gathering in order for them to do their part or whatever else. But they don't sit and read through a whole bunch of meeting minutes about everything if it doesn't apply to them at all.
Right. And then going back to kind of the calendar, if you're new to time blocking or that's not something that you have done before, how do you start to begin to put some of that in there? I mean, you mentioned starting with maybe the quiet hour.
Yeah, start with your peak time, decide what that is, then put in your quiet hour first. And actually, whenever you're doing your calendar, you want to put in the things that are the most important or that are set times. For instance, If you're going to an industry meeting, that's blocking out a day probably, or 2 or 3. If you're going to have staff meetings, that time has to get in there because it's set and you're going to work around it. And you noticed how some of the priorities were off because of the fact there was a meeting there. So you want to get the set things into your calendar first and then schedule in to your peak time when you're going to work on your quiet hour and when your other priorities might get done. And just know that your calendar is going to change. It's impossible to be perfect unless you're maybe a robot.
So are there any tips for kind of as you go along and you get further into managing it? Are you time blocking for a month? Are you time blocking for a week? How do you come back in and add to or remove from?
I think as you go along, you're going to find where things are going to work out better for you. So the first time that you're time blocking that first week, things may change by the second day. They may change by the second week. For the first month, it'll be moving things around. But as you saw in there, I had, lunch scheduled across the board, email scheduled across the board, mail across the board. It doesn't always happen that way. Mm-hmm. I have in my head that I am always going to do those things in the afternoon because I know that's my time and that's what my calendar is. But they're going to get moved around if there's a meeting I want to attend, a webinar I want to watch. So that's going to affect it. So then when else can you put it in? When else can you get it done? And sometimes there's things that you have to make a decision too. Well, I need to work on this priority in this meetings now. How important is it for me to go to this meeting or listen to this webinar? Is it more important that I'm working on this priority? It's a kind of a routine that you have to do all the time, but it can get changed when it needs to be. Mm-hmm. And it'll take you it may take you, you may figure out your schedule within a day and it works permanently, except for when you change things. And you may not figure it out for a month, but within a month, I'm sure that you would have a pretty good idea of when your own time blocking could happen. Mm-hmm. And there's another technique, especially if you're doing your priorities all in a row, called the Pomodoro method that's been popular. Some people really like it. It's really good for hairs. And the original idea, and there was an Italian guy, and the reason it's called Pomodoro is it was actually a timer that he had that was shaped like a tomato. And so a Pomodoro means tomato in Italian. So that's where the name came from. But what he said was work for 25 minutes, take a break after 5. Work for 25 minutes, take a break after 5. So there is your hour. It's 2 major 25-minute segments. It doesn't mean within the 25-minute segment, you couldn't do something for 10 minutes and do something else for 10 minutes and do something else for 5 minutes and then quit. Important thing is when you're working on something, and this is part of your pace too, try not to break in the middle of it. Because when you break in the middle of working on something, you lose your concentration. Microsoft did a study, and I forgot the exact minutes at the time, but I think they said it was something close to 11 minutes when you get interrupted. So when you get a phone call, when someone stops by your office to ask you a question, whatever you were doing, this is just a kind of a quick little technique. Before you even talk to that person who just walked into your office, write a quick note down about what you were thinking about, or finish that thought at least that you were doing. And then look up and talk to them because they're just going to wait if you're still looking down. You could acknowledge them, make a note, and they'll just be quiet and wait. And they'll get used to it too after the first couple of times it happens. But you have a better chance of getting back to what you were thinking about if you make a note about what that thought's about rather than totally losing it and not getting it back for, another half hour because you were busy with this other person. I'm full of tips. I can keep talking.
I was going to say, I love the tips and tricks of the trade. The one thing that, we saw in the calendar when you showed, and we talked about the time blocking, but we didn't necessarily touch upon the color coding and not necessarily how you do that, but what do you assign and what is the goal with that?
Okay. The goal of it is to really look at your calendar a little easier. So I'm going to go back to it for a second. If you have Outlook, Outlook's color coding is so much nicer than Google's to me. But when you go into an appointment, you see a little block that shows colors, and it usually says categorize. If you go to the very bottom of the block, it says all categories. When you go in there, you can change what the colors say. Right now, they just say their color, like red, blue, green, yellow. So I changed them all and put down what I wanted them to mean for me. So the priority A, B, and C that you saw, the quiet hour was what they call red, which looks more like pink, but anyhow, that was red. And then I had a dark purple for priority C. So you just go in there and you can assign the colors. And this is kind of what it looks like. And there's a box on the right that tells you new, and you just pick new and then click a color. But there's more colors than you'll see on the left side. You just go to this little box that's inside this green circle again. And you can see the color that you can change to, pick whatever color you want. And then that color starts to mean something to you. So whenever you see something. So now when we go look at the calendar itself, so when I look at this calendar, I know right away, without even have to read the words it says priority B, that when I see the cranberry, that's priority B. And when I see the dark purple, it's priority C. And so I can look at my day too and say, okay, where do I have open? Well, wherever it's white. This teal green or mint green, however it's showing up to you, this is not a color. This is the color of my calendar. I chose that because it was a color I wasn't going to use. So anything you type in and don't assign a color to, that's the color it shows up. So the email shows up as this mint green. But I even chose gray for mail because I just picked an odd color. So you pick a color that might mean something to you. What else? Like blue. Social media, just to me, for some reason, is light blue. Just a calming color, social media. And I took a light orange for planning. So by looking at it, I can see like where days change. So notice that the quiet hours in a different day. So right away, I know even by the color that that's changed. And I can see that, I can go straight down with my colors are in a row here, but they're not here. And whether I'm going to get to priority C or not in a blank space or not. But you always want to try to leave some open time too. So that's what's white. Nothing scheduled because your day changes and you can put something in or you just work on whatever you'd like to do at that time.
I was going to say, do you have a good rule of thumb in terms of how much flex time you should allow, either between meetings or between projects?
I think at least 5 minutes, a 5-minute break between projects. You want to have a break to give your mind a change of pace. Mm-hmm. Talking about your pace. So you get a break. It's easier to change gears if you take a break. That could be go get a cup of coffee. Maybe you have a snack at some time during the day for your break. Maybe you're a doodler. Maybe you just sit and doodle for a couple minutes. It doesn't have to be exactly 5 minutes either, but just at least a couple minutes to let your mind relax, change gears into something. I could use the word more fun. I know drinking a cup of coffee or tea is fun, but it used to be for me. If you happen to have a small radio in your office, classical music the studies have shown to prove that classical music helps your brain just relax and stimulate you. Some people can actually work with classical music in the background. Mm-hmm. And if you just listen to that for a few minutes, even if you just put it on while you're taking a break, just to relax and change gears, getting up too, even if you just walk to a file cabinet. But if you just move during your break, if you don't go get a cup of coffee, if you just get up and get out of your chair and just say, okay, I'm going to, just get a little bit more energized, just by moving just now, it just changes my energy level right there and I didn't even get out of my chair. So taking that break really can help you add your energy that may have gotten down while you were working on something steadily.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've seen some people just do some like office moves where they're like short sprints of just movement, but they said it makes such a big difference in terms of coming back to
you could just go like that.
Focus
Just
and kind of a new posture, basically, when you sit back down. What other things do you have that as you kind of look at time management as a whole, where do people fail? Where do people trip up? And kind of what's your like, last words of wisdom?
tripping up is a whole other conversation. We need to have another time. You want to talk about time wasters? We'll spend a lot of time, but I'll tell you what I would like to end on. I think what's important with routines is finding ways to use things that can make things go faster. And I will have a routine checklist for you, but you want what I call helpers, routine helpers. Like, where can you create a form? Where can you make a checklist that you can, so every time you do this routine, it's the same. And okay, here's another big tip that I haven't mentioned to you either. An operations manual, especially in larger corporations where you have turnover, but even in small, you never know when something's going to happen. And even if nothing happens, and when I say happens, I don't mean them leaving necessarily, but somebody's in a car accident or in the hospital and they're going to be out for a couple weeks. They take a vacation. They're gone for a week. I had a job at a Sears Corporation, and I was brand new, and I had been trained how to do foreign exchange currency when they moved an employee out of the country. Well, my boss was out of town, and the issue came up, and I was there, and I could do it. The only other person who trained me was not in the office that day. So had I not been there either, it wouldn't have gotten done that day, and they needed this information like that day for some reason. So when somebody's out, if you've got an operations manual, that means literally operations. How do you operate? How do you do this? What are the steps to this particular procedure? Everything from like what I just showed you with the calendar. Go. They used to have the categorized on the top. You no longer can find it unless you get into a meeting. So you get into a meeting, you go to categories, you go to all categories, you change the name of the category. That's the steps to do it. What are the steps to do the procedures in your job? Put it in a notebook, print it out, because heaven forbid it's lost on the computer. And it should be done for every single job. And for you too, have a checklist. These are the steps I need to do for this. And it needs to be explained in detail, then explain in detail. If it doesn't, or you could do both. You could have it, here's one in detail, and here's a quick list of everything that we're going to do. And that will save so much time every time you, especially for something you don't do very often. So if you have it as a checklist or a template or create a form for things you have to fill out, it just makes things go faster because you've got something to refer to and to get it done. But in operations would be good for everyone.
We have on Seed World talked some about standard operating procedures and importance of those, especially for seed companies and warehouses where there are operations and procedures that are done seasonally. So you're not doing them every day, but you're doing them for a heavy period of time, once or twice a year. Making sure that if you have somebody new in those positions, that they know how to come in and, what has been done before in terms of the processes. And even, like you said, if somebody's out sick, that somebody else can step in there and fill those roles and not miss a beat.
Right. It's a tremendous thing to have, and most people don't have one.
What about, you mentioned the biggest kind of time wasters, and that we're not necessarily going to touch upon that today, but like, what is the one thing that knocks people off the tracks when it comes to time management?
Interruptions. It's the biggest usual time waster. I mean, it can be little things. And I'll tell you one that's interesting. I was helping some lawyers get organized, and I noticed they did the best thing that they could do. A lot of people have food on their desk. And food is an open invitation for people to interrupt you. If you've got a candy jar there, and if they feel like they want a piece of candy and they know it's in your office, they're going to walk in and they're going to be nice about it and say, could I have a piece of candy? But then they're going to feel like they still need to have a conversation with you. So not only did it cost you because they interrupted you to get a piece of candy, but now they're going to have a social conversation, and you might have been really working really well on this project and it just went out the window. Mm-hmm. So if you have food in your desk, put it in your drawer.
It's a good thing to remember, because I a lot of offices that I go into, there is a candy dish there.
Oh, so what I meant to say about that too is that the lawyers, what they did is they established a place for food. Mm-hmm. And there was a place for food in their snack room. So if they brought stuff in there, they kept the candy dish supplied. They kept that every once in a while, if they had a birthday party or something, of course, that would be in the lunchroom or coffee room, whatever you call it. But if they just wanted to just bring in cookies or something, they just brought it in and just left it there, and people would get it. But that was I said, that I'm impressed that you guys are doing that, because it keeps people from bothering everybody else.
Yeah, that's good. The other thing that I recently read that kind of caught my eye, and it's been maybe a week or two ago now, but was that, if somebody is 5 minutes late to a meeting, but there are 10 people in that meeting, you've wasted that many minutes. So, how many hundreds of minutes are wasted because somebody is 5 or 10 minutes late to the meeting and it's delayed in getting started. So, just one more thing to be cognizant of when it comes to interruptions and in being punctual and managing time. So, anything else, Eileen?
Did you want to be here another hour?
Okay, so that's it for today. I could pick Eileen's brain for a long time. Like I said, this is something that I struggle with. I continually try to improve upon, and I am a work in progress. So that's it for today's Pro Power Talk. Thanks so much, Miss Eileen, for joining us and sharing your expertise and insight here. I really appreciate it. To you, our Seedwell Pro members, thanks for joining us. We hope that you have found this information to be of value and fun as well, and something that you can walk away and put to use in your daily life. So if you're going to be taking this journey, I'm going to be walking down this journey. I'd love to hear how it's going for you, how implementing the time blocks and the color coding is. And I am excited because Miss Eileen's going to be joining us on LinkedIn. And she's going to be hosting an office hours with us next Friday, January 24th, from noon to 1 p.m. Central. Do I have that right, Eileen? Is that what we agreed upon?
I think it was noon my time,
noon,
which would be mountain.
Noon to 1 Mountain Time, 1 to 2 Central Time. So right. We had some discussion there. So look for that next Friday. There will be more information coming your way on that. And she also has a checklist for you and the opportunity to sign up for her very own newsletter. So I am super pumped about that. And that's also an opportunity for you to interact one-on-one with Eileen. So that's it for today. Thanks for joining us and have a great day.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you.